Well, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, or good evening. If you're listening to this webinar overseas with my special guest, Brian Puerling. Is that how you pronounce it right?
Got it.
Is this joining us from today? It's my pleasure and privilege to have Brian with us today. He has done much research on digital technology in early childhood, and he has done webinars on that topic. He works for early childhood webinars. Is that correct? Currently,
Work for Chicago Public Schools right now. Yep, and I've got a whole slide to kind of show the my background that I've got to inform my perspective. Yep.
Fantastic. Well, I'll leave it over to you, Brian. And if you have any questions for any of those who are listening, I would encourage you to post them in the chat, and then we'll go through them at the end to see if we can get them answered for you. But it's all yours, Brian. Hi, I'm Michael Hilkemeyer, and thank you for watching this webinar replay. If you would like to see more webinar replays like this, why not become a member of our ICT in Education Teacher Academy, where there are over 40 online workshops for preschool teachers and early childhood practitioners. So you can learn what you want, when you want, where you want, anytime, anywhere. And become a member today for just 48 Australian dollars per month, and then cancel anytime you want. So feel free to watch this replay as much as you want. And then if you'd like to learn more, check out our academy today. And I hope to see you and help you with your professional learning needs in the future. You'll find the link to this academy under this video.
Are you able to see it? Yes. Okay, great. So our time together today is really to focus on, what benefits there are in really looking at the opportunities that different educational technology tools can offer teachers and educators in the context of early childhood. To get to know me a little bit, I just kind of wanted to offer my kind of graffiti wall, if you will, of who I am and what I've done. I have worked in the Chicago Public Schools. I'm back in the Chicago Public Schools. I'm an early childhood specialist working with administrators to make sure that they are maintaining high quality programming. I've worked with the Fred Rogers Center, which is Mr. Rogers, if anyone knows who that is out there. I've also worked with children in foster care. I've worked with media in terms of young children, Nickelodeon, Sesame Street, PBS, in terms of looking at what the essential curriculum underpinnings should be for shows. And then also I'm an author as well. I have done some publications in terms of working with water spans for children age 3 to grade 3, but then also focused on a smaller span between preschool and kindergarten. Have been a keynote presenter for the New Zealand Early Childhood Council. Love that work. So I bring a variety of perspectives. I'm also a parent. That's my daughter Lydia there. She's not that old, and she's much older now. She's in 4th grade. But like Piaget, you use your child as your laboratory, for trying things out. So just to kind of give you a little bit of a context for what I'm coming to you with today. I just kind of wanted to give us a little bit of a context and a mindset for where we're at today, and have a little bit of a video just to kind of show you, and then I'll explain how this video really kind of contextualizes, our time together today. So really it's about, trying to figure out what works, what doesn't work. And when we look at this image here, which is a very essential toy for young children, but it's also kind of a good metaphor for our work as teachers and as educators, that things aren't always going to work the first time, and we need to try things multiple ways. And sometimes we need some help along the way. And it's great to ask for help, and it's good to know who are the best people to ask for help. So I kind of have two parts to today's presentation. It's looking at, some classroom practices, and then later on, it's going to be looking at what administrators, what leaders can do, what center directors can do to support the development and expansion of practices of their teachers. I'm going to speak to a variety of examples that are both traditional and modern kind of technologies. The traditional, it could be a ruler, it could be, something that doesn't plug in, that looks at making, tinkering, that kind of looking at the essentials and foundations of designing and creating. And then the more modern technologies, the things that that are plugged in, battery operated, that might be screen based. So there's going to be an integration of those, but also kind of isolating them at the same time, because they're all very essential. So looking inside the classroom, what could this possibly look like? One thing that I like to do is really think about what our collaborative approach can look like in a classroom. So at one of the schools that I used to work at, I created a Tinker Lab, a makerspace for our youngest learners, 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. And this was kind of like our signature space for how we were going to approach our work together as well as independently. And you'll see this is a tiled wall with our kind of collaborative agreement in the center. Children this age aren't always able to actually create their own signature, which is what is typically done in older grades, but each child got their own tile, wooden tile, to then design and create and put their own signature touch on. And so their tiles were put in around the agreement that we had decided on. Also very framed in a positive approach, not a do not, but this is what we do. And this is something that everyone sees as soon as you walk into the room. So that helps us kind of reorient ourselves or orient ourselves as we get into our work together. So one of the first things I wanted to share was an example of working with 4-year-olds. It was within a construction or a building unit, working with 4-year-olds. In one of our maker spaces, we have 3D printers, and there were a variety of experiences within this unit, but one of them was looking at digital design alongside physical design. So there was building with Legos, building with blocks, building with tree blocks, building with bricks, all those essential materials that are necessary, but then also looking at what digital design can look like. So there have been a variety of apps that were used to help them kind of explore a digital design that could be then exported to our coordinators in this space to then 3D print them, which could then be brought back to their classrooms, put into the dramatic play center, put into the block center that could be then brought into their play. This is an example of one of their designs, and just to kind of give you a size scale. This type of print would take about 20 minutes, just to kind of give you an idea, but also something that the kids can take home at the end of the year, which is kind of a small kind of fun trophy to be able to take at the end of the year. We also have had an AV studio and also value the idea of being able to capture moments in video within the units that we had. So there are 2 units. One was on sea life, one was on animals. And so we used Stop Motion Studio. It's a free app that we had used on our iPads, and we had created very, very short videos, but the videos were to look at character development, but also creating a plan within those. And a storyline, very, very brief, but also all those layers are extremely intentional, but also complex for a 4-year-old to pull all together. But we did a lot of pre-planning with that. So I'll show you the first one. So there were two groups of sea life that were chasing each other, but then kind of came together to exit the sea scene, as you can see. That was the first plan that they had created. And then the other one is about animals. You're going to see that there is a cat in the center, and then there are, I believe, dogs on the outside, if I remember right. So if you notice there, the dogs were chasing the cat, but then the cat jumped off of the stage, and then I think the dogs jumped off the stage. And so before we did our video, we looked around the classroom to decide what characters we were going to use. We were going to decide what the plan was going to be in terms of the snapshots that we were going to make. And then added upon that, we talked about what sorts of sound effects and music, two different things, would help show and tell our story. So all of those layers took time, even though it was a very short video, but really pulled together, a story that's essential in terms of early literacy in a video editing context. Self-portraits are a very I don't want to say popular, but essential, I would say, assessment that at least we use in the US. And I wanted to find a way to expand what the self-portrait can offer in terms of exhibiting or displaying a child's development over the course of a school year. So we used an app called ChatterPix, which is very simple to use. It's all, I think it's called, ChatterPix. There's another one that's essentially the same, but I can't remember the title of it. But you can you can import a picture into the app, and then you can draw a line on it, and then it will animate it when you offer a recording. So I'm going to show you what this one looks like. So this was early in the school year, I should say.
Hi, my name is Gavin. I am 5, and I like to build.
So one reason why we decided to do this, other than using just the photo or just the illustration, I should say, is because there is a biobehavioral shift that happens in young children at this age, where they don't just identify themselves as a specific gender, or a brother or a sister, or a preschooler. They start to identify themselves as aspects of their interests. And we wanted to exhibit that and share that transition using this video. So we thought that this really was a successful way in doing that. And then in another way, more back to the making and tinkering, we offered in the Tinker Lab an opportunity to design a self-portrait sculpture, if you will. And so what they were able to do is look around the Tinker Lab and just observe the materials. We had a whole host of materials. You'll see here, there are just random boxes. There are, pieces of wood, there's markers, there's popsicle sticks, there's toilet paper tubes, there's paper towel tubes, and we had screws, we had, just things that parents have donated. We're always interested in parents donating things. Kind of like a thoughtful and intentional recycling center is exactly what we were. But, offered a way for our kids to reuse materials. So in looking at how to design a self-portrait, we did it in various steps. And the first one you're going to see here is the sculpture self-portrait plan. And so having just looked around the room first, They did some sketches. They came together in pairs and talked about what they had saw, what or seen, and what materials could be used in different ways. And then started to think about how they could use some of those materials more intentionally to create a self-portrait sculpture. And so in this one here, you're going to see the illustration, but then we were also trying to pull in the literacy at the same time, the labeling and their invented spelling, to label the different materials that they had observed and the materials that we had already introduced to them, or that they had perhaps donated or had seen, to begin really thinking about how these materials were going to come together to create the self-portrait sculpture that they wanted. So the design plan is on the left, and on the right you have it in progress as he's pulling the pieces together, and you can see that there are some pieces coming together, the toilet paper rolls and the paper towel rolls. There's foam, and then I think there are some materials that have been abandoned, that happens naturally. And then bringing it all together, you can see it all here. And you can see his plan, is right next to him. He's using that as his roadmap for the whole way, the whole time. And as an educator and as a teacher, we were always there checking in with them. How is it going? How has your plan been working for you? Have you had to make changes? Have you had to add new materials? Have you had to abandon materials? And if they haven't worked, how come? Because all of that is very insightful for them to realize how materials can work and how well they can work together and how they don't necessarily always work together. And this whole idea of the tinkering and making, I'm going to address later on in another example. But this was one of our really big success stories, because I don't know if you can see, but right next to Braden on the table there is a wooden base. The initial idea was for their sculpture to fit on that base. Clearly, we noticed that right from the get-go that his plan was not going to be able to fit on that base. So that was feedback for me in the future, when as a teacher, don't plan so small, because their ideas are much larger and bigger, and be prepared and ready for that and embrace it. We also, had lots of conversations about how we can learn about electronics and how we can be helpful around our classrooms, but around our houses and our homes. We're always looking for ways to make connections between the house, the home, the community. I feel like sometimes those become isolated. And so we were trying to help them see how they could be helpful around their house, but first being helpful in our space when we recognized opportunities. So if you remember from the first slide, or one of the first slides, there was the lights that were on the wall with the tiles around it, the signature tiles. Those batteries would go out every once in a while. So we would look for helpers to try and replace the batteries. So we just gave them tools and we gave them batteries and just invited them to explore them, to figure out how to replace those batteries and how to get into it, how to figure out how they turn on and off. So I've got a little video to show their exploration and navigation of this.
You certainly did. Let's take a look. You did it. How can you turn it off? How do you think you can turn it off? Table. Now press down on it. There you go.
So sometimes there's some scaffolding necessary, but what I really loved about this clip, or what I love about it, is the phrase "I did it." Is we're always trying to provide children with some agency, self-agency, in what they're able to do on their own, and then move them forward with what else they can do building on top of that. And so that was really a big underpinning, in all the experiences we were trying to provide in this space. So I feel like this video kind of captured that. And it was always interesting to hear the stories about when parents would come in and say, oh yeah, they noticed that the batteries were out and they're in the flashlight at home and we need to replace them, and they knew how to do that. So it was exciting to hear and see, the connections that they were making. Kind of going back to a making and tinkering space. This is actually something that my daughter Lydia went to the school that I had worked at, and she was, she was able to come into the tinker space when she was younger. And there was one, this was pre-COVID, but I had a horrible fever and I was feeling terrible. And I had a substitute for me a particular day, and they had an open creation day. Those were very intentional days that we had where it wasn't a focused creation. It wasn't a focused tinkering or tinkering and making day where they could just kind of explore and create something new. She knew I was homesick, and I had actually gone to Target. You guys have, is there a Target in Australia? I think there is. There might be something similar. Yep. So I went to the Minute Clinic because I was just feeling terrible. And I had like 103 temperature, and they're like, oh no, we can't handle you. We need to call you an ambulance right now. And they brought in a stretcher and they wanted to carry me on a stretcher. I'm like, I am not going to go out of Target on a stretcher. Like, I don't feel that bad. And so Lydia had found out about this and knew I was feeling bad. And she knew that I needed some soup. So she wanted to make me and build me a lap table to have my soup on. So this is what she had created. She had, looked around the room and found these different pieces of cardboard. We had used golf tees as nails to, to kind of secure pieces together. And so in this situation, she had recognized a problem or an opportunity to address a problem or a need. And I think need, in terms of the design thinking approach, need is always something to be looking at, to address and to look at and to help address. So she brought this home, and this was fantastic. And so this is kind of the foundations that I was speaking to earlier that are really essential and don't always require something that's plugged in to help kind of cultivate that approach, that framework. So I was excited about that. And then, but when we move on and to, or when we cultivate that transforms as kids learn and teenagers learn different things. This Natalie Hampton, who was in high school at one point, this is a U.S. citizen. She had noticed that, not at my school, but this is just an example of what this can transform into, this cultivating this mindset, that kids were having a hard time finding kids to sit with at the lunch table. If we all think back to what it's like in the cafeteria, those who don't have a lot of friends or who are not popular have a hard time figuring out who they're going to sit with, where they're going to sit, without risk. And so she recognized that and created an app where kids could organize tables or groups to sit with before it was their lunch period, so that they knew when they sat at that table, they were going to be welcome. They knew that they were going to be there with a group of individuals that were inviting and excited for their presence. So again, that's just kind of the mindset that, where you want to try and cultivate, in the idea of ed tech, what we can kind of be doing and cultivating in terms of problem solving, addressing needs and opportunities. So when we look at leadership and administrative support. So we're making a shift right now a little bit. A lot of it was previously kind of focused on what teachers can do, what parents can do, partnerships. It's really important for our leadership and administrative and our directors, center directors, to be on board and be supportive as well. And so there's various ways that we can do that and kind of think about that and be in the interest of just time management, because that's always something that teachers, parents, and administrators and center directors are up against every single day. So one of the things is we're all guilty of these emails that we send out, that have lots of information, and I have TLDR, which stands for too long didn't read. So we need to be thinking about, are there other creative ways that we can get information to our teachers that invite them into what we're trying to get them to see, understand, and get excited about. So thinking outside of the emails, one thing that I started doing were these 2 Tips Tuesdays. And so every Tuesday, I would give 2 tips with the text was extremely minimal, but there was a visual aspect to it. And so the text would give just a brief description of what it's trying to convey to the teacher. And I did this for parents as well. And I've done this. Yeah, I've done this for parents. But I feel like the visual piece is much more inviting and it is easier to digest the information and what information is trying to be conveyed. And so I've gotten a lot of positive response to this approach in the past. And just doing 2, I have created a map for myself in the past for depending on what is going to be encountered throughout the school calendar. Perhaps it's holidays, perhaps it's vacations coming up, perhaps it's a seasons changing, and really thinking and being very intentional about what these tips are going to be for different parts throughout the year, and also inviting teacher feedback. What are some tips that you think might be helpful for us to be offering you and for the other teachers? Again, very succinct, always keeping it to 1 page, very easy, very digestible. And then kind of digging a little bit deeper, Padlet is a resource that I've used as well. This one was focusing on just for teachers and classroom management strategies. Teachers are always looking for more ideas with classroom management, especially now coming out of the pandemic. I don't know how expansive it was in Australia, but in the US it wreaked havoc for sure. So we're seeing various responses, and kids haven't had a school experience. So being part of a larger group or a class is a transition for them, and something that they need some support on. And sometimes the teachers are going to be looking for some support for a larger group of kids who need that support. So I tried to provide like a menu of options for some things that they could do, that they can look at. Padlet offers, it's basically a virtual bulletin board, really. And it can include images, it can include links to documents, links to videos, just notes. If you look closely, there's an add a comment feature. So if I'm facilitating this and hosting this, and a teacher has a question about it, like, this is great, however, I'm experiencing this, I could reply with something that's a little bit more specific, to what their needs are. So it's a great space for dialogue. It's a great space for offering very specific support. And it's something that's ongoing and evolving over time, and was very successful. This is a space that I would recommend to use with grade level teams, it's extremely flexible and extremely adaptable. And then depending on how you use it, you can also apply a password to it. So it can be public, but if you're going to be putting photos and videos on there, you can apply the password to make sure to protect the identities of anyone that needs to have that protection. It's a really great resource. So as we kind of think about moving forward, I think it's always important to be very mindful and intentional, and to really kind of come up with plans and goals. And so maybe you've heard of this framework before, the SMART goal framework, and I think it's extremely effective. It takes a lot of thought and intention and time to really craft yourself a goal out of this framework. But what I love about it is it really sets yourself up for success. So SMART is obviously an acronym: specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. And so even just the question at the bottom of each of these is really, really helpful for you to figure out how to craft a goal that's setting yourself up for success. I have asked teams that I've led in the past to create goals based on this, and I am being asked to create goals for myself from my supervisors as well. So they are very, very effective because they are really looking at, or at least this framework is looking at, how to look at all the bits and pieces really granularly about what you want to do, how you're going to do it, setting yourself up for a timeline that makes sense. And then moving beyond that, it's looking also at what challenges and obstacles you're going to potentially encounter. So just thinking about them, you're going to be bombarded with phone calls and emails, and maybe even text messages, depending on what digital platforms you use. You might be encountering those. Field trips are going to happen. You're going to have illnesses, sicknesses. Right now, RSV is running rampant in the US, so that's, lice happens, there's so many things that come up. So just thinking about those. And then you have your routine drills that you might have, disaster drills, fire drills, and things like that. Unanticipated classroom management issues that you might be having. And then there's obviously the other. So when you're creating these goals, really think about what, or in what ways you can incorporate these into how those goals might transpire over the course of a period of time that you've identified for yourself. So I think it's also important for us to just kind of look at the why we're doing this, and how we are supporting, and how we are really kind of solidifying the bedrock that's necessary for our kids, and what we're doing to move our kids forward in the years ahead. Here, so just kind of from the design thinking and the computational thinking framework from the Tinker Lab that I had created, this is just kind of a very, this was like a public facing kind of curriculum that we had shared with families. So they got an idea of what happens at various grade levels. So just for a context translation, preschool is three-year-olds, junior kindergarten is 4-year-olds, senior kindergarten is 5-year-olds. So you're going to see that there are some things that move over because they go into a deeper level. And sometimes it's also just because a child might not get it in junior kindergarten, but they might get it in senior kindergarten, based on the type of experiences. So it's really trying to be intentional about what your kind of your through lines are, what your kind of common denominator curriculum is, and what it should look like, and what you're trying to achieve to support things in primary moving forward. there are always technology obstacles, and I think it's also important to prepare for those. And those obstacles can be wide ranging. It could be an app didn't go to your device. It could be that your device wasn't charged. It could be you're having Wi-Fi issues. Be cognizant about what obstacles that you might encounter when planning to use different devices or different apps or different ed tech resources. One of the things that we encountered, because there were so many apps and so many devices, was that there were apps that all of a sudden went out of business. And once the device was updated, it was not, you couldn't use the app anymore. So sometimes I was like, well, don't update my device because I want to be able to keep that app. But in order to use other apps, we had to make sure that our devices were updated to the current operating system. So it's all about being able to be flexible, adaptable, and able to pivot when you have to. So Doodlecast Pro was an app that we loved and used widely. It was an app where you could bring in photographs and illustrations, and you can incorporate audio recording so kids could narrate or describe what was happening in the illustration that we had taken a photograph of. And when that wasn't available anymore, we really had to think, okay, we need to look at what other options there are. We quickly found out that, Explain Everything was an option for us, or there was an app by Duck Moose, Draw Write Tell, or something like that. So we knew what our options were. So it's all about, from a leadership standpoint, knowing what those options might be or alternatives might be, so that when our teachers come to us with this right now because they're mad that their app is gone, we can then think about, okay, you know what? Let's come together, let's reset, and let's grieve the loss of our previous app and think about what opportunities we have with resources that we haven't considered yet. And then moving forward, like I said, yes, these gifts are just so quintessential for this. But so once having told them that they don't work anymore and that they're mad at us, then we say, I have got an idea for you. This one I've already looked at, I vetted it, I've tried it out. It's going to do everything that you wanted to do in the past and more. And then everything's great. And helping them, just kind of coaching them through that transition process is really going to be helpful. I think that when it comes to ed tech and technology, we really want to nurture the value of being vulnerable and trying new things. Teachers want to be the knowledgeable other. They do. And I totally get that. But we also just need to help them understand that sometimes we don't always know what the outcome will be, even though you have an expectation. But as a leader and an administrator or a center director, if they know that you're going to be there with them, supporting them, trying something new, and if it doesn't go their way, you're not going to be shaking your finger at them. You're going to say, you're going to give them a thumbs up and say, you know what, let's try this differently next time. We're going to work together on that. So I rushed through a lot of ideas, a lot of approaches, and I'm hoping that there are nuggets that you are able to take away. I wanted to leave some time for questions, if there were any, and if you're not vulnerable enough right now to be public about your questions, I put my email about in here. If you want to reach out to me directly, we can have a conversation, whether over email or set up a chat, to kind of troubleshoot and kind of problem solve, some of the things that you're thinking about, some of the things that you want to try. So I don't know if there are any questions that have kind of come forward in the chat as of now, or if there are any just in general that we can entertain.
There's been no questions at all, really, at this moment. But I'm sure if anyone would like to ask you questions, Brian, like you said, just to use your email there and
Mhm.
send them your way anyway. I found that, very, very enlightening. So thank you so much, for the work that you do in enabling practitioners to be able to use technology effectively in their teaching and learning environments. So thank you
Absolutely.
for all your work in that. Look, I found that one of my best things was out of this. I really liked the Q-tip Tuesday.
Yes.
I thought that was
Yep.
quite quite good. And to see some of the work that the young children that you've worked with have done, like was it robot, and how they you could actually see how they planned it on paper first.
Yes.
It was
Yep.
drawing it down and doing that, and to use all those different apps as well. It was really quite
That's good. Good. I'm glad.
quite informative. So thank you so much, Brian, for your time today.
Absolutely. No worries. Yeah. I'm glad to be able to come join you today, and looking forward to continuing the conversation with, anyone who wants to join it, and you can figure out other ways to engage together, and maybe have some other webinars on some more other focus topics.